Hello there, and now we come to the final part of the Misfits, in which all the drama really does reach a climax. All was well. Everyone was tucked up in bed. The old grandfather clock ticked reassuringly away down in the hall. It was a balmy summer night. Everyone had been lulled by the warm, sunny day, and Dolly and Desmond had polished off a very fine bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, watching the sunset with Bob and Pip rocking contentedly in the swing. Desmond was once more wondering aloud why they'd ever bought the thing in the first place, as neither he nor Dolly seemed to get an opportunity to enjoy it. Pip opened one eye, then promptly closed it again. It was obvious why they'd bought it. It was one of his most favourite places in all the world. So with everyone tucked up for the night, it seemed like just another day at Sunflower Farm, to everybody except Bobby. Now, people laughed at Bob, but for all he was a small terrier, he was actually one of the best guard dogs you could ever wish for. Nothing got past him. He could sense when the postman was a mile away and threw himself at the front door every morning, catching the mail as it came through the letterbox. Dolly frequently bemoaned the fact that he failed to bring it up to them in bed, but Bob ignored her. He had limits, after all. And the delivery men, they all knew Bob. One or two wimps remained outside the gate, hooting their horn for attention, but mostly they all knew Bob for what he was, an exuberant little chap who wouldn't hurt anyone. Anyone, that is, that was a friendly person with honourable intentions. Others were a different matter. Asleep in his favourite position, other than between Dolly and Desmond in the big king-sized bed, he was on the window seat in the bedroom, blissfully chasing rabbits through a field of buttercups, when suddenly he was wide awake. Ears twitching, radar alert, he sat up and looked out over the yard. He could hear an engine, and it was the wrong time to be hearing engines. He just knew. He saw a vehicle snaking its way up the lane to the farm and emitted a low growl. Desmond rolled over in his sleep. "Shh, Bob," he murmured sleepily, but Bob was having none of his shh. Jumping off the window seat across the bed, much to Desmond's disgust, he ran down the stairs to the door, where he stood sniffing and growling. Something was definitely wrong. In the old horse box, 3 men sat smoking, sharing a bottle of whisky which they passed among them. "Who's got the stun gun, then?" asked one. "Me," muttered the middle one, swigging from the bottle. "You sober enough to be accurate?" asked the driver, holding his hand out for the bottle. "You bet," replied his companion. "I could do this drunk and with my eyes closed." "Ha," said the driver, "well, you'd better. We can't afford to mess this one up, and I don't think we'll have much time." "You worry too much," said the first man, taking a swig from the bottle, then passing it back to the driver. "It'll be a doddle." Bob continued to growl. Pip tried to dig himself further down under the duvet, but when Desmond suddenly sat up, seemingly wide awake, he sensed that something was afoot that demanded his full attention. He sat up, ears pricked. It was very clear from the tone of Bob's growls that something really was amiss. All of Desmond's misgivings returned. He swung his legs out of bed and shook himself awake. He quickly threw on a jumper and pulled on a pair of jeans and ran downstairs, where he pulled on his boots and, for good measure, grabbed his gun. Dolly, disturbed by all of this, said very sleepily, "Des, what is going on?" "I don't know," replied her husband, "but I suggest you dial 999, but stay put. Ring Andrew as well," he added as an afterthought. "Whatever for?" asked Dolly. "You can't just call out the vet at all hours for no reason." "Just do it," said Desmond. "Better safe than sorry. Andrew knows us well enough." And indeed, he thought to himself, Andrew took enough money off them one way or another. Should it be a false alarm, he could hardly complain. Meanwhile, the old horse box had parked up, and 2 men got out and walked around to the back of the yard. They knew exactly what they were after. They'd been dispatched to acquire the lion who resided there. Some Russian businessman had put in a requirement for a tame lion for his daughter's zoo. the 5-year-old had a thing about animals, and for now, lions in particular, so that was what she was going to get. Rufus yawned, stretched, then settled his beautiful head back down on his paws. Biggles, momentarily disturbed, ruffled his feathers in mild annoyance, then settled back down into the warmth and comfort of Rufus's fur. He was almost immediately rudely disturbed. Ping! What was that? Something whizzed right past him. He could have been hit. Looking around, he felt Rufus stir again, apparently startled. Then immediately he flopped down, not easing himself back comfortably, but flopping like a wet rag. Something was wrong. Biggles was then horrified to see 2 large shapes hurrying towards them. Suddenly it was bedlam. Bob and Pip raced towards them, barking like fury, hotly pursued by Desmond. The whole farm was suddenly awake. Something was wrong, badly wrong. The noise stopped the intruders in their tracks. They swung round. "That's it," said Bob. "Desmond can sort it now." But Pip wasn't paying any attention. He was in full flow. "Pip!" yelled Bob. But his brother had leapt into the air and caught the intruder with the stun gun firmly on his leg, and was swinging around as the man yelled with pain and tried to get Pip off his leg. The stun gun went flying through the air out of reach as he flailed at the terrier, locked onto his leg. There was a loud crash. Nobody could work out what that was, but it came from the other side of the yard. "Hold it right there," said Desmond, pointing his gun at the men. "The police will be here any minute." With that, the other thug kicked viciously at Pip, who released his hold on the other man and flew through the air, landing with a sickening thud. "Run!" yelled the man, and the 2 intruders ran into the shadows and made for the front of the house where the horse-box was parked. Empty-handed they may be, but getting away was their priority now. In the dark, Desmond couldn't see clearly to aim, but he followed them round to front. The sight he met would have been hilarious in other circumstances. 2 thugs were paralysed. Between them and the getaway vehicle was Boris, who had trampled down part of his fence, hence the crash, flanked by Daisy and Maisie doing their best to look intimidating. Boris was stamping the ground in a very menacing fashion and snorting for all the world as if he meant serious business. Just for good measure, Gussie and Google had joined the throng, hissing and darting at the 2 men, who were by now frozen on the spot with fear. Desmond moved into the light, training his gun on the 2 men as the sound of police sirens could be heard approaching. "Hold it right there," he said. But frankly, that was unnecessary under the circumstances. Whilst the police arrived, took the men into custody, and told Desmond they would be back in the morning to take his statement, Bobby ran over to his brother, lying inert on the ground. "Pip," he cried, "Pip, whatever do you think you were playing at?" There was no reaction, no movement, not even a twitch of an ear. Bob licked his brother's face. "Come on, Pip," he said, a sickening feeling creeping over him. "Come on." But there was no answer, and as Andrew the vet pulled up as the police drove away, all that could be heard on the farm was the most pitiful, mournful wail as Bob threw his head back and howled. Andrew quickly established that Rufus had just been knocked out by a tranquilizer dart. "Shouldn't be any real damage," he said, pulling his stethoscope out of his ears and looking up at an anxious Desmond, not forgetting Biggles. "He'll sleep it off. Might wake up with a headache. I'll pop up tomorrow and check him out, just to be sure." They moved swiftly across to Bob and the motionless Pip. Desmond was biting his bottom lip anxiously, and Dolly, who, hearing the police, had now joined them, was beside herself. Andrew bent down and checked out the little terrier. He wasn't sure about this at all. He took off his jacket and gently rolled him into it, lifting him, oh, so gently. "I need to take him back to the surgery with me," he said. "Check him out properly. I'll know more tomorrow." Bob let out another mournful wail. Pip was oblivious, unconscious. All the animals went back to their respective beds, but there was a distinct air of melancholy hanging over the usually happy community. It lingered the next day. Andrew came and checked Rufus out, and as he predicted, there was no lasting damage. Bob never strayed from his heels, hopeful of news of Pip, but when Dolly asked Andrew about him, Andrew just shook his head. It was touch and go, he told them. Bob was inconsolable. Life without his brother was unthinkable. Yes, he was a menace on occasion. Yes, he was an idle little so-and-so sometimes. And yes, he was aggravating. But Pip was Pip. He had to survive. He just had to. The melancholy was shared by all on the farm. Pip might just be a small terrier, but he left an absolutely enormous hole. 2 long days passed. Bob was listless, couldn't eat, couldn't be bothered to even bark at Posty. Nothing and nobody could cheer him up. Lying near to Rufus and Biggles, he was immune to all attempts to lift his spirits. It was generally acknowledged that Boris had played a blinder and was well and truly part of the farm community, but without Pip, it meant nothing to Bob. Suddenly, Sid, Google and Gussie came running towards them, with Sybil, Dilys and Dermot in hot pursuit. Rufus looked up inquiringly. Bob remained, mournfully resting his head on his paws. He didn't see Desmond and Dolly also approaching, and was only aware of them when he saw Desmond's boot between him and Rufus. "Hey, Bob," said Desmond, "look who's here." And he knelt down and gently placed a blanket on the ground next to Bob. Inside the blanket was a groggy-looking Pip. Groggy, but very much alive. Bob yelped in delight. "Pip! Pip!" he cried, and proceeded to lick his brother's face enthusiastically. "Steady on, Bob," said Dolly, herself very teary and relieved to have the little chap back in one piece. "He's still a bit sore, but he'll be okay." "Yes," said Pip, flashing the whites of his eyes, looking suitably pathetic, but feeling pretty good, all things considered. "Andrew says I need lots of TLC, lots of fuss and gentle cuddles, and lots of time to fully recuperate." Bob was not entirely deceived, but settled down happily alongside his brother, more relieved to have him home again than he could possibly say. The gang was arrested, and they were found to be the tip of a very unsavoury iceberg of crooks out to make a fast buck trading in exotic animals. Life at Sunflower Farm quickly settled back to normal. But nobody forgot. Everyone remembered how relieved they were that Rufus was rescued. They all remembered how everyone had worked as a team to protect the farm and each other. Boris was firmly established as one of them, and Bob never forgot how desperately sad he was without his brother Pip. Pip, whilst not enjoying the pain of severe bruising and concussion, never forgot his own heroic behaviour, and what's more, never tired of repeating the story to all subsequent new arrivals at Sunflower Farm, each version more dramatically embellished than the previous one. Everyone who played a part in proceedings would listen and roll their eyes. But Pip, when all was said and done, was Pip. So I hope you enjoyed that. I shall be reading some more stories soon, and I plan to rework the website at some point. But for now, if you want to find out more about what books are available and how to get them, then email me, Rosie, ROSY, Teale, TEALE, @gmail.com. Catch you again soon. Bye for now.